Hi, everybody. I'll just give a moment for anybody who's joining me. Serena Armshaw here, transformational energy healer and mentor. And I support sensitive, soul driven people to release overwhelm, reconnect with their inner truth, and live aligned to their higher self. So, today, what I wanted to chat about is what I'm calling the end of an era. Now, to do that, I'm just having to pop back to 2025, which in numerology was a year nine. And in numerology, that's all about endings and completions. So, knowing that when we came into 2026, it was going to be a year one, which was all about beginnings. So, when we got into January of this year, I thought that's it. We are going to be absolutely flowing into those new beginnings, especially with the Chinese New Year and this year being the year of the horse. So I thought we were definitely going to be galloping into that new start because I was really well and truly ready for the new start. I'd done lots of completions last year, lots of endings, and I felt I was ready for that new start. And then I heard people talking about how the first half of this year was going to be very different from the second half of the year. So the energies of the first half of the year were still about the endings and completions, and clearing out those old energies. And then when we go into the second half of this year, that's when we can really feel those new energies and especially feel that fire horse that came in February of this year. So I was really looking forward to that. We got to the beginning of March and then wallop. That's what I felt. Slow down. You're not racing ahead. Did you experience that as well? So at the beginning of March, we had that full moon in Virgo, and my father-in-law, who had been diagnosed with dementia for a number of years already, had to finally go into residential care. He had been living at home alone following the death of his wife, my mother in law, back in March of last year. And he'd been doing really well, but it just got to the time, the age, the stage that he needed to not be by himself. And so he went into residential care. And, I just remember that day when he sort of left his home for the final time, a house that he'd been living in for about over 60 years, that he'd been living there. It just really felt like an end of an era. And I began feeling these waves of grief flowing through me. Now, quite honestly, I wasn't sure if that was just for my father in law with his situation, whether that was my staff, whether that was people globally, or it could have even been a mixture of all of those. But it just felt all those waves of grief. And then, within about a week later, my own dad fell ill and had to go into hospital. And he had various tests done, and he even had an operation, but it was still clear that he was critically ill. In fact, this was just before the spring equinox, and we were informed by his consultant that he didn't have long to live and he really was on end days. So we rushed over to see my dad, and we ended up sitting at his bedside for many, many hours. It really felt like we were doing 12-hour vigils. It was such an emotional roller coaster of a time. And for me, I kept having those thoughts of not seeing him again, that he wouldn't be able to be at home, he wouldn't be able to be in his garden that he absolutely adored, just that we wouldn't be able to do the kind of things that we've always done with our dad. And I just kept seeing loss after loss after loss. And so felt those waves of grief flowing through me once again. Now, if I'd been the person that I was before, I just wouldn't have coped with that at all. I would have been a complete mess. I would have been so stressed and anxious. And then it was really interesting, actually, this bit right up at the equinox. Now, for days, my dad had just been lying there, his eyes closed. It was like he was in a trance-like sleep, and he wasn't talking, apart from the odd time where we would ask him a little question and he was able to give a 1 or 2 word response, which I actually found absolutely fascinating that he could do that. And we kept these questions really light. I mean, I did want to ask him some of those deep and meaningful questions, but it just seemed like it would be an invitation to his end. So we kept the questions light. And, when we were at home overnight, we would quite often there would be this worry about, are we going to receive that dreaded phone call in the night to say that he's passed away? So you can imagine our focus was very much on my dad, and it was such an intense time. But that night of the equinox, there were moments when it looked like my dad was talking. He was still lying there, very still, his eyes closed. Well, I say very still. There were a lot of hand movements. There was a lot of facial expressions along with all the talking that he did. And it just looked like he was having this really intense conversation. And it felt like he was either bargaining for his life or for more time. But I just knew that this was between him, his higher self, and the goddess. But I also had this feeling, that if my dad made it through the equinox, that he would continue with his life. And in fact, on the Monday morning, when we woke up, we didn't have that dreaded phone call. And I just had a thought and a feeling that my dad was going to open his eyes and he would be talking. And sure enough, when we got there on that Monday morning, he opened his eyes and he began talking to us. And so he really got through that, and he's still with us today. But this end of an era feeling just kind of persisted beyond March. And I must say, it's just been very weird. It's like, for instance, there's been things that's been triggering off old memories, and that has been bringing up a whole train of thoughts. And I found myself really wandering down memory lane. Like, for instance, well, my dad did eventually go home after several weeks of being in hospital, but he is very slowly recovering. So the frequency of the care visits to see him has increased, and this has meant that I've been going back to my hometown much more often than I normally do. And as I've been driving around my neighborhood, memories of my childhood at home with my parents have continued kind of like popped into my mind. Especially thoughts of like where I went to school, when I went to school, and lots of aspects to do with school as well. Or another time where I'd see a post on social media that talked about something in the years when I was a teenager. So then that would bring me right back to my teenage years, and I'd be traveling down that memory lane once again. And, I remember when I used to go into town with my best friend, on that Saturday, and we used to go to all the shops, and I would love doing that. But I wasn't allowed to do that very often as my parents were quite strict about me going out and doing things like that. Now, I don't blame my parents because I really do understand where they're coming from now that I'm that older adult, and I know they were being very protective. But another example is like I'd hear a song, and then that'd be a song that I first heard whilst I was at university. So again, all the memories would be flooding back, and I'd be thinking of my times when I was at university. Now, it's not like I haven't done all this reminiscing before. You know what it's like. I'm sure all of you have done that as well. And when I have done that, I would often say things like, oh, that was several lifetimes ago, because that's what it felt like. It felt like it was several lifetimes ago. But it just feels like there was something else going on here. So when I stopped to think about it more, it was like an acknowledgement of those times are well and truly over, because it feels like we've really gone into, I don't know, a really new world. It feels so different. So all of these memories have just made me feel okay, all those lifetimes, as I call them, are well and truly over. I really can't, I'm not sure if I'm expressing this very well to you, but there's been these feelings of sadness and regret when I've been wandering down those memory lanes. Now, I've had a lot of challenges in my life, and I've overcome many of these challenges with the deep inner work that I've done. I've spent time decoding and clearing out all those negative self beliefs I had, all the traumas, the stuck emotions, getting to the source of the stress and the anxieties, and clearing that karmic pain as well. And I really feel that I've come a very long way. And it's not all been doom and gloom either. I've also had many wonderful moments in my life too. But I just wasn't expecting this sadness that I was feeling. That really surprised me. So I looked again at what this sadness was about. And as I said earlier, there was this feelings of a regret. And it's like a regret that I haven't fully lived those experiences. A sadness that I was often feeling too much of my lack of confidence, or I was full of self doubt, or there was some kind of negative self limiting beliefs going on about myself. So I wasn't really able to fully immerse, in those experiences and enjoy it. Now, again, a lot of that is not new. I said earlier that I've had a lot of challenges in my life. There's been that low self esteem, low confidence levels, negative self beliefs, as well as various traumas and abuses that I had in my childhood. But it was something about feeling like I have wasted time on all of those negative self beliefs, that they've just really prevented me from living fully in the moment and totally enjoying those experiences. And it's time that we're not going to get back. We know that time flies by so quickly and the ages just race on. Now, I'm not blaming my younger self for any of this either. It's just the way that it was. But I'm so grateful that I just did that deep inner work and shifted my beliefs and my perceptions of me and the world. And I really feel that I've evolved into my higher version of myself. Now, is any of this making any sense to you? Because I'm really not sure if I'm, you know, finding the right words to describe it, but can you relate to any of what I'm saying? If you can, I would really love to hear from you. If you've had any similar experiences, so please feel free to drop any comments below. Now, you might ask, well, what about the second half of the year, and is that feeling any different? So, as I ventured into July, as all of us ventured into July, but what I found for me is that those trips down memory lane were lessening and lessening, and I could really feel a different kind of energy coming in. And it kind of feels like I've gone a long way down that memory lane and I'm just beginning to come round the corner. And it's like I'm nearly on another lane and I can just about barely see the scenery. And I'm really excited about what this new lane is going to look like. So I'll probably keep you posted and I'll let you know how I get on. But in the meantime, it would be lovely to hear from you. So please feel free to drop me any comments below, and likes and hearts are always welcome too. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I look forward to connecting with you soon again. So bye for now.